just microcosms of a much larger story. And that larger story is that the private sector taken as a whole has improved the standard of living of the poor and everybody else overwhelmingly. Overwhelmingly. And we see dramatic inroads made in poverty rates all over the world over the past couple of centuries in countries where they weren't even wealthy enough to have a welfare state yet. So it couldn't be that the welfare state is really responsible for the reductions in poverty. The poverty reductions came before there really were substantial welfare states in these places. So no way the state can take credit for that. You can measure the standard of living of the poor in terms of living space per capita, the amount of clothing, the caloric intake, the life expectancy. We can talk about incomes. We can talk about it just goes on, right? I mean, we can even talk about the height of people, because we've even seen that there's a gap between rich and poor in terms of height that has narrowed almost to nothing thanks to the market economy. And yet, just as in the case of the three examples I gave here, those specific examples, in the more general case of the overall market economy, you get exactly the same complaints about capitalism being exploitative and evil, when exactly the opposite is obviously and demonstrably the case. And meanwhile, the people in public life who earn the most cheers are the ones who spend their time condemning this system and saying, well, what we need to do is just seize resources and hand them to you folks. When it was precisely because the redistributors and the envious in our ranks had been beaten back long enough. That's George Reisman's formulation. They had been beaten back long enough that it was possible for capitalism to create all the wealth that it did. Now we're getting back into envy as a virtue. It's incredible that those would be the people who would be cheered. They should be shunned in civilized society for taking for not merely taking for granted, but seeking the destruction of the very institutions that have created such stupendous wealth and incredible standards of living for all of us. So gratitude is something we could all afford to have. That is in unfortunately short supply. In fact, before I leave you today, let me read you an email I got years ago in response to this article I wrote on rent-to-own stores. And I somehow missed this email at the time. And when I was doing a search of my inbox, because I was looking for something related to rent-to-own stores, this email popped up and I could see that I had never opened it. I must have been busy and I just never got to it. And here's what this person wrote. While shopping at these stores is a self-made decision, it is a decision most of us, and by us I am representing a large group of poor or paycheck-to-paycheck people, wouldn't have to make if our situations were better. I have tried to find a higher-paying job, but nobody will hire me for those jobs. I have tried applying for more desirable forms of credit, but I always get denied. The more I get denied, the more desperate I become, filling out more applications for credit, which ironically serves to hurt my credit more. I write this coming from the belief that everyone is entitled to the same things. If you have an iPhone 6, why shouldn't I? If you make $50,000 a year, why shouldn't I? If college and learning and studying in school came easily to you, why should I have such a struggle with it? We both know the answer to the last question is based on something outside of anybody's conscious control. You cannot control things like rate of learning, etc. But since our economy stems from that is, the job you get is dependent on education, and the education you get is dependent on your ability to pay for it or your parents' ability to pay for it, then you really can say there is a whole group of people who are poor, have bad credit, cannot find a job or better job than what they have, and it's not their fault. I believe that this is where the U.S. federal government should step in and level the playing field. And then he says, obviously, you can't make businesses hire people to do jobs they totally aren't qualified to do, like being a heart surgeon if you don't have the training. He says, but if the pay were leveled out across the job market and you guaranteed every person seeking employment a job, you would make things more fair for everyone. If you equally distributed the wealth across America, everything else would follow suit. Rent would be more fairly priced, food prices, gas prices, car prices, etc. Financing would be available to everyone. So the next time you see someone walk into a rent-to-own store and you think to your rich, pompous self, What a bad decision he is making. He is such a lowlife. Also think to yourself, if I already own what he is going in there to buy, why shouldn't he also have what I have? Now, I could go through and critique that statement, but a lot of my episodes have kind of done that in one way or another on education and other stuff, and I think it would be exhausting. But I read that to you mainly for the attitude in there. I'm entitled to whatever I want. Could you imagine that? I'm entitled to just sit around and get what I want. And by the way, I mean, this is just almost a trivial observation, but there's no way any of the luxuries we enjoy would ever have become available to us if everybody had insisted on having them immediately. What we love is the fact that new technology comes out. It costs a fortune. Only rich, eccentric people can afford it. And then they keep the market alive for it while innovators come up with cost-cutting measures that eventually make them within reach of the rest of us. But if you immediately said we all need to have a plasma TV, that would just and we're going to pass some law demanding that the price of plasma TVs can't be higher than $250, that'd be a great way to guarantee that the plasma TV industry goes away. But that's the least of the problems with this. I mean, I know I said I wasn't going to do this, so I'm not. But he says, I've tried to find a higher paying job, but nobody will hire me. He tells me nothing about what he's done to make himself worthy of being hired. Have you taken a course? Have you trained yourself on anything? Have you done an apprenticeship? Have you taken a lower paying job and then stayed late and then gone in early and stayed late over and over and over and gone to conventions and conferences on your own time and learned everything you possibly can? Doesn't sound to me like that. This type of person is not going to do that sort of thing. I mean, I'd be very surprised if that were the case. I've tried applying for more desirable forms of credit, but I always get denied. What have you done to work on your credit? Maybe more desirable forms of credit might be nice. So you start with something modest. You get a credit card where they're willing to give you a $500 credit limit. So you start there. You don't have to have the same credit card that the Rockefellers have. Just start small, and you build it up little by little. So anyway, it's just the attitude of this. And this is why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does well. I mean, here we have libertarians who just know everything there is to know about everything. I mean, they understand everything about how things work. And she can just go around and speak in slogans about, it would be good if everybody had X. So therefore, we're going to pass a law requiring that everybody be given X. And then people cheer as if there couldn't possibly be any consequences of this that might be undesirable. It's like they're not even capable of conceiving of that. If I want something, we demand it and we get it through violence. And there are no negative consequences. That's frustrating, but when you are appealing toward base envy, people are not going to demand to see your work. They're not going to demand to see all the steps you took to get to the outcome of your reasoning. They're just going to go with it. So it's frustrating, but what can we do other than soldier on, right? What can we do other than continue and fight and do our best against the civilization wreckers out there? What else can we do? All right.